Daniel, the book of Daniel, woohoo! He is a saint, to be sure. He was a godly man forced to live in an occultic culture. You're going to see some startling sort of similarities between Daniel and his dilemmas and some of the things that you and I are dealing with. We're going to talk a bit about how sophisticated the city of Babylon was in Daniel's time. Yet still, he lived a biblical and a powerful life. The culture of Babylon was very, very sensual. Fertility gods were celebrated in often sort of rather decadent ways. And the food was sumptuous. The entertainment was top-notch. The Wi-Fi was exceptional. And Daniel is going to live as a young man because he's taken as a young man. I wonder if he wasn't perhaps in his late teens, if not early 20s. And with all that cultural pressure around him, he stood firm. We're going to see the character of this man, Daniel, throughout our study. At the same time, I believe, because he was biblical, then God says, I'm going to open up your heart and mind. And he was a seer. Some of the most important prophecies of end times Bible prophecy are in the book of Daniel. As we said before, if you don't have Daniel chapter 9 down exactly right, then your whole eschatology, or study of end times matters, is going to go crazy, cattywampus, which is the Greek word cattywampus or something along those lines. Daniel's going to frame the book of Revelation, which we're studying on Sundays. And when teachers delve into the book of Revelation without Daniel, they're going to get a little weird. Daniel was a man of purpose. He was a man of prayer. We're going to see a couple of those. And that's why, and therefore, he was a man of prophecy. He was a young guy that affects his entire generation. I have my suspicion that the Magi who come to see Jesus, Herod and all of his scholars were right there in Jerusalem. They wouldn't go 5 miles to Babylon. It took some Magi coming from the east or east of Jerusalem. Who were those guys? Maybe we'll spend some time on that at another time, but these are likely, those Magi were the intellectual offspring, if that's the right term, I believe, of Daniel. We're going to talk at a future time about the Mazzaroth, which is the 12 constellations. Every month, the sun, let's call it roughly midnight, if you will, the sun every month is in a different constellation. There are 12 across the ecliptic. And we say, wait a minute, are we supposed to stay away from astrology? And the answer is yes, stay away from astrology. But the Mazzaroth, that God names all the stars, in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day, night unto night, they utter speech. What do you mean? It's the 12 constellations. Well, the devil's all, can't have that. So he's going to move on these Babylonians, really Nimrod and his followers, to mess it all up and pervert it into today, what is the zodiac. Is the book of Daniel reliable? Why is that important? Well, because we're going to get into some of the specifics that are so specific. Have you ever heard the term that from Malachi, called that 400 BC, Malachi is the last prophet of the Old Testament, and then we don't hear another prophet until John the Baptist shows up there baptizing at the Jordan River. So a lot of people and even theologians have said there are 400 silent years from Malachi until John the Baptist. If you know the book of the book of Daniel, chapter 11, you'll see that God was not silent at all. We're going to get into Daniel chapter 11. It'll take us maybe 3 different passes at it. It is so specific. This guy's going to get a girlfriend, and this girlfriend's going to do this, and he's going to poison that guy. It is such a play-by-play analysis that people said, there's no way that Daniel prophesied that before the events. And so many people say your Daniel was not by Daniel himself. It was by somebody late dating it. In fact, I have a quote from Wikipedia. Wikipedia says, the dating and authorship of Daniel has been a matter of great debate among Jews and Christians. The traditional view holds that the work was written by a prophet named Daniel who lived in Babylon during the 6th century BC. But most modern biblical scholars maintain that the book was written or redacted in the mid-2nd century BC, more or less after the events of the Maccabees and the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, which we'll get to in chapter 11. It's too precise. The specifics are too spot on. No way, say the modern but biblical scholars. And most of the predictions of the book then therefore refer to events that had already occurred. Close quote. Modern scholars, I got to take you through a little bit of seminary background. Two kind of interesting guys, Friedrich Schleiermacher, he died in 1834 in Germany, and a guy named Ferdinand Christian Bauer, died in 1860. Both of these were at a seminary in the University of Tübingen near Stuttgart, Germany. Now you have to understand that the Dark Ages, we're going to call it 1200s there, AD. The Roman Catholic Church has their thumb on everything. And in fact, many of the leadership all across Western Europe and Eastern Europe was such a strong fist that, they made up all kinds of craziness that wasn't in the Bible. But the Bible wasn't in the language of the lay person, so who knew if this priest was right or not? And that led to what's called the Dark Ages. And then you're going to have the Dark Ages, and then things are going to begin to change with Martin Luther and the protesters or the Protestant movement. And then that's when the Bible began to be written in the language of people that could read it. And then they would say, wait a minute, your priest said this and that, but here's what it says in the Bible. That largely begins a period in Europe called the Enlightenment. And what that means is people started reading their Bible, and they recognized that many of the dogmas and doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church may not be God after all. And then people begin to throw off. The priest would say, you're going to get excommunicated for not paying your indulgences or any number of things that the Bible doesn't specify. And then more and more people said, that's fine because it's not even in the Bible. So science took a great leap in the period called the Enlightenment. We're going to call that mid-1500s, 1600s, and 1700s. And as you know, that is going to blossom in the form of architecture and art. Leonardo da Vinci, Brunelli, all those grand masters and so on. And in science. Then in certain portions of Europe, humanism begins to take a great leap forward. Humans now become the master of their soul and the captain of their providence. And so on the heels of the Enlightenment, that's on our boys Friedrich Schleiermacher, and Ferdinand Christian Bauer. They're churning out Bible students, really clergy, in something that becomes known as the higher critics. What does that mean? Now, this is before the archaeological boom of the 1850s and later, when people started digging around and finding these actual places that the Bible mentions, giving credibility, intellectual foundation for the Bible. But in that little interim is when guys like this, they said, we know how to interpret the Bible. It's by the context. So the higher critics begin to say things like, there is no such thing as Bible prophecy God speaking the future. Because from a humanist, post-enlightenment sort of awakening brain power, humans are the intellectual engine of this planet. And one of the things was, for instance, the book of Isaiah. That wasn't written by Isaiah. How do you know? Contextual criticism. In other words, we read all the flow and we realize, yeah, the first half of the book of Isaiah looks very different from the second half. Must be two different dudes. So the Deutero-Isaiah theory took hold. And then come to find out, did you know that Moses didn't write Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? Don't you go to school? And of course, they took particular aim at Daniel. There's just no way. Now, modern scholars, well, the founders of these higher critics, etc., this was before archaeology began to recognize, you know what? The Bible is right. And trying to reconcile the humanistic thinkers of the post-Enlightenment who were sick of the Roman Catholic Church's dogma, then we're going to explain the Bible the way that we want to. Well, I've got a word to those higher critics. Are you ready, Blake? Go. There is Israel, and you can see the Dead Sea there to the bottom right. Currently, we got Israel to the west. You have Jordan to the east of the Jordan River, and this particular map shows the land of the Palestinians. Go. I want you to look at this map, and I want you to see this little dot there. This is a community called Qumran. In 70 AD, when the Romans wiped out Jerusalem and destroyed the temple there in Jerusalem, come to find out 900 or so Jewish citizens were able to escape the Roman siege barely. They came traipsing down south on their way to, see where it says Hebron, and if the map was tall enough, we could see all the way down to a place called Masada. Herod the Great had built a great city on this three-sided cliff. So these 900 citizens of Jerusalem who barely escaped with their life, they're going to head on down to Masada, and the Roman 5th, 12th, and 10th legions were hot on their trail. In Qumran was a community of monastic Jews. They thought that all those city-dwelling Jerusalem Jews were sort of missing the boat in their liberalism, so they built a community in Qumran, starting a couple hundred years before Jesus was born. And so they built a monastery there, and you know what they did all day? They collected, copied, and distributed books of the Bible and a number of other historical matters. So when those 900 Jews came racing southward on their way to Masada, the guys at Qumran are going, the monks, if you will, or I should say the monastic Jews, where are you going in such a hurry? Get out of Dodge. Here come the Roman legions on our heels. So what they did was, they didn't have much time, so they rounded up as much of their parchments, because leather was the best writing sort of medium at the time. They gathered them up, and in a hurried fashion, they went up into the hills, and they hid them there. Sure enough, the Romans came through, and whatever Jews were left there at Qumran were either killed or enslaved, and for the next 1,800 years, everybody forgot about all the scrolls and stuff that they'd stuffed and squirreled away. In fact, go ahead. Here's some of the ruins that have been sort of restored. You are looking south. Can you see in the upper left-hand side of the slide? That's the Dead Sea. You're looking south, and you'll see the mountains come down to a pinch point, and that's where all those 900 Jews from Jerusalem skedaddled south just around that sort of pinch point. Go. This is an artist's rendition based on the archaeology that's been done there. That's what the Essene monastic sort of thing looked like. They were pretty ingenious. They had a system of capturing and dispersing the water. Hit the go button. But see where it says G up there? There was a one specific cliff. Go, and it looks like this. That's cave number G of the Dead Sea Scrolls. You can see that sort of wash or wadi goes up. That's west, up those ever increasing inclines, and there are many, many, many caves. So far, they have discovered 11 caves, 600 manuscripts, 200 of which are books of the Bible. 80% leather, some papyrus. Can you see the wisdom of God? Does God know that the higher critics are coming in about 1,800 years? Yes. Does he know that there's smarty pants people who believe that the Bible couldn't possibly be God's word, and they're going to come with this sort of understanding? The Bible has been translated over and over so many times, it's lost its integrity, so you can't believe it. Not every word of the Bible is inspired. What does the Bible say about that? Yes, it is. God knew that the higher critics were coming, so he used the Essenes to lock away books of the Bible, and in this very arid and dry environment, leather and even parchment lasts for almost 2,000 years. Now you think with me, 70 AD, really 71 AD, the Essenes had in their midst parchments that were hundreds of years old when they had it. When they stuffed them away in these caves with no water sort of humidity, God says, I have the perfect place to freeze all of these ancient scriptures so that when the smarty pants come along with their university training, watch this. In fact, go ahead. Here's some of those cliffs, and so you can see it wasn't easy to get to, but that's where the Essenes hid everything. Go. And they hid them in many of the cases. They were in jars like this that were sealed. And you can see that's an actual scroll. 400 manuscripts. Many were more than 350 years old when they were hidden. That would make some of these parchments 1,300 years BC in some cases. Most were found sealed in jars like that, 40,000 fragments. Every Old Testament book is there except for the book of Esther. So 350 BC, huh? So what? Well, that predates the fall of Jerusalem. Remember, Daniel chapter 11 is going to talk about the Maccabees, the Ptolemies, and the Seleucids. And I want you to notice something, that it is locked away in the Dead Sea Scrolls before they happen. You pull out a book of Daniel from one of these Dead Sea Scrolls, and guess what's there? Daniel chapters 9, 10, and 11. What? Check this out. This is truly amazing to me. Go ahead. That is an Isaiah scroll that was found intact. Do you see that? That Isaiah scroll potentially is 2,300 years old, and it still is legible. Go. Look at that. Hit the up arrow if you would, Blake. It's 24 feet long. It's upwards of 2,300 years old. And the differences of that book of Isaiah from the Isaiah that you have in your lap is less than 1% different. Now you need to know how amazing that is. And another example. Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare wrote roughly, the mid-1500s. And we watch Romeo and Juliet and Midsummer Night Dream and all the different things that you see. And when they are performed, they're reading from a script. Okay. How many original autographs of Shakespeare actually exist today? Answer? None. None. And that was only 1500s. So we try to find the oldest copies of Shakespeare's plays that we can, and they're within, in some cases, about 100 years from the original. But we're okay with that because that is very good history. Did you know that in your Old Testament, there is Isaiah, 2,300 years removed from your Isaiah in your lap? And the difference, Shakespeare's copies, there are marked differences, big ones. But that book of Isaiah and the one in your lap, there is less than 1% difference. In other words, let me sort of restate it. Is God's Bible important? Yes. Is it likely then that a God who knows everything, including the future, would God then go to extraordinary measures to preserve it? Answer, yes. And one of the most amazing ways he did was the Dead Sea Scrolls. How are you feeling me on this one, artist? And as I said, there are rolls of the book of Daniel that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they have in them, and they predated the destruction of Jerusalem, obviously. And there in those ancient scrolls are Daniel's 9, 10, and 11. What about those higher critics now? There's another thought about this late dating thing. Oh, by the way, I wrote in my margin here before Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In Matthew 24, verses 15 through 22, Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation. We'll get to that in Daniel chapter 9. And then Jesus said that Daniel wrote it. Remember the two Isaiahs I was telling you about? Isaiah didn't write that. It was two different dudes. From the older section and the newer, or I should say, the first section and the later section, Jesus quotes from both of those and says that the beginning couple of chapters and the end couple of chapters were both written by Isaiah. If you search through your Gospels, you're going to find that Jesus is going to cite verses from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And every time Jesus mentioned those verses, he says, who wrote them? Moses. And like Chuck Missler used to say, Jesus said that Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Isaiah wrote the book of Isaiah. And Jesus says that Daniel wrote the book of Daniel. Chuck Missler used to say, I'll save you a whole lot of time in dusty old libraries. If you have a tough time that Jesus knew what he was talking about, then you got bigger theological problems than who wrote whatever book. Also, I want to show you this too. Go ahead if you would. There's the up close. Can you see how legible that is? That's truly amazing. Go. This is a copy of some of the oldest copies of what's called the Greek Septuagint. The Septuagint was commissioned by Ptolemy II Philadelphus. He said, I want a Bible translated from Hebrew, please. Now, of course, this is 300 BC, so there is no New Testament yet. So I want a Bible, please. Please translate it from Hebrew to Greek. And that is the Greek Septuagint. They began churning out copies in 285 to 270 BC. And guess what you find in the Septuagint? Daniel chapter 9, 10, and 11. Is everybody okay? Have we established, and there's much more scholarship if this is interesting to you, but have we established the fact Jesus said Daniel wrote the book of Daniel? Back to especially when we get to chapter 11. Those 400 silent years from Malachi to John the Baptist are not silent. God knew exactly what was going to transpire. But he decided to write it in advance before it ever happened. Josephus says that when Alexander the Great was rolling through the Middle East, called at 300 BC, that he comes to the city of Jerusalem. I'm Alexander the great Greek honcho. We've been rolling over nation after nation. You better let us in. Josephus says that the high priest at the time there in Jerusalem was a guy by the name of Jedua. He meets Alexander. He shows Daniel's prophecy regarding him. in Daniel chapter 7, which we'll have fun with. And he shows them about his 4 generals, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemaeus, and Seleucus. He goes, you have 4 generals, right? Alexander's all, I do. This verse, great general, is talking about you. Alexander is so impressed, he spares the city of Jerusalem. That is in the history books, folks. And many outside historians document that Alexander spared Jerusalem because somebody showed him who he was in the Jewish Bible. Daniel chapter 12, verse 4 says, but you, Daniel, when we're done with this writing, I want you to shut up those words and seal the book until the time of the end. And many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. According to this prophecy in Daniel 12, in the end times, there will be an explosion not only of knowledge and computer abilities, but also concerning biblical end times prophecy. Please understand that Bible prophecy is not in the Bible so that we can prognosticate and predict the future. Bible prophecy is mostly that when the actual events are happening, like those 900 Jewish people I told you about, they've got to looking at a bunch of different scriptures, especially in Daniel chapter 9 about the pouring out. They said, we better listen to this. And they saw that Daniel chapter 9 prophecy was concerning them too. And that's one of the reasons, an impetus why they met, why they left, and how they left. Bible prophecy is mostly for when it's actually happening, the people can say, wow, look at that, it's in the Bible. And you might have noticed as we're getting closer and closer and closer to the events that the book of Revelation speaks of, are you sensing that, wait a minute, Gog and Magog, that's Russia. Persia, that's Iran. And as we saw on Sunday, specifically Elam, Israel is going to knock the bow out of the hand or destroy the bow of Elam. And is that what we are seeing right now? Fascinating. Close up the words, Daniel. Seal the book until the time of the end when knowledge shall increase. And Harvest, you and I are in the most amazing prophetic times, I think, since when Jesus walked the sands of the shore of the Sea of Galilee. I believe that. We are seeing more Bible prophecy come true right in our midst, and that would be a fulfillment of Daniel 12, verse 4. Now Babylon itself. Make your way over to the book of Genesis, chapter 10. If you were with us in our study of Thyatira, we went into this in some detail. You need to know where Babylon comes from and why Babylon truly is Satan's city. As you've heard me say before, you're on your way to Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. The Bible has been described as the tale of two cities, and it really is. Jerusalem is God's city. There's an anti-city. There is. It's Babylon. And we're going to talk about that, of course, all through, because you're going to have what's called an ancient Babylon and then a neo-Babylon. But more on that in just a moment. Are you in Genesis chapter 10? Look at verse 7. So, Noah, Mrs. Noah come off the boat. Their sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives come off the boat. And then in chapter 10, we're going to get a genealogy of who goes where. Ham, remember, is cursed by Noah because of kind of what he did. And so one of his offspring, are you in chapter 10, verse 7? Let's look at this, was Cush. One of Ham's son was Cush. Verse 7, the sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabtra, Ramah, Septicah, and the sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. By the way, that's the forerunners of the Saudi Arabians. Verse 8, Cush begot Nimrod. Circle that. He is very, very important. And Nimrod began to be a mighty one on the earth. And that word for mighty is not a good thing. He was a terror. Verse 9. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Another unfortunate English sort of translation. Yes, before, but we would say in the face of God. He stuck a fist out to the heavens. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before, really in the face of the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. He is the one who invented the entity Babylon. But he did some other cities too, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and the land of Shinar. That is the valley or the plain between the Tigris and Euphrates River. Verse 11. And from that land he went on to Assyria, and he built Nineveh. Were the Assyrians ever very difficult, in fact brutal, on the people of God in Israel? Yes, they were. What was their terrible capital? Nineveh. Not only did Nimrod found Babylon, but he founded Nineveh. And then in the interest of time, look at verse 14. Pathrusim, Chalcehim, from whom came the Philistines. Did the Philistines ever give the Jews a hard time? Yes, they sure did. Verse 16, please. And the Jebusite. Jerusalem is God's city. Who usurped Jerusalem before King David got there? The Jebusites. The Amorite and the Girgasite, verse 17, the Hivite, the Archite, the Sinite, verse 18, those guys, and after the families of the Canaanites. God's promised land was Israel. Jerusalem is the capital. But under Joshua, did they have to fight their way back into the promised land because it had been taken over by usurpers? The entire group of those people were collectively known as the Canaanites. Where did they come from? From Nimrod. Babylon, built by God's first major rebel, Nimrod. Do you know what Nimrod's name means? I will rebel. Nimrod marries his wife named Semiramis, and she is called the Queen of Heaven. And in Babylonian lore and myth, Semiramis was eternally virginal. However, she was impregnated by God, gives birth to a son, Tammuz, in late March. He's called, this blessed occasion at the equinox is called Ishtar. When, you know where that's going to end up, right? When I showed you when we went to Thyatira that the occultic college of Babylon, when Cyrus the Great takes over, they split. And the archaeology seems to be fairly compelling that the majority of the priests in the college of the Babylonian mystic arts settled in Pergamum. Pergamum, where the book of Revelation, where Jesus says that's where the seat of Satan is. You mean the temple to Caesar, the temple to Zeus, and the temple, well, yeah, perhaps. But then the scholarship has come to light in the last couple hundred years that the archaeology has found all kinds of Babylonian occultic archaeology. That's where the college went. The kings of Pergamum ruled the Anatolian Peninsula, what is today Turkey, for a couple hundred years, and then they bequeathed that entirety to the Romans about 133 BC. Then Roman rolls in. The Romans roll in. And when they show up there at Pergamum, they encounter some very incredible, amazing occultic activities. Priests were levitating off of the ground. What they call automatic reading, where somebody in one room could tell you what's happening in another room or even across the city. They were called seers. Then you had all kinds of ghosts and all kinds of different things. Telekinesis, where the people could move objects around with their mind. That was real bona fide stuff. Astral projection. And every occultic practice here today that you can go to, palm reading, phrenology, studying the bumps in your head, and astrology, of course, That was all by Nimrod's people starting at Babylon, picking up and moving to Pergamum. And then when the Romans took over, they said, this is impressive stuff. And so the college of the Babylonian mystics moves to Rome. And as you might imagine, has a tremendous impact on the Romans. And then when the Romans say and declare ultimately that Christianity is the religion of the empire, had the Roman Catholic Church by that time been infiltrated by many semblances of the Babylonian mystic arts? Yes. We talked about that. If that's interesting to you, check out our teaching on the Church of Thyatira. Back to Mr. Nimrod, his wife Semiramis, eternally virginal, the queen of heaven. Does that ring a bell? She's been miraculously impregnated by God. She gives birth to Tammuz at the equinox and calls the blessed occasion Ishtar. When the Roman Catholic Church gets a hold of everything, they begin to change the names. And did you know that many of the celebrations of the Church of Rome were just basically many of these, and they give them the names? Ishtar becomes what? Easter. Hey, you mean to tell me that all of our Christian sort of holidays, the classic Christian holidays, they have sort of pagan beginnings? The answer is yes, they do. Uh-oh. So we can't have Easter egg hunts? We have Easter egg hunts at our house, but we're not celebrating Tammuz, I'll tell you that, because it's fun to hide candy in plastic eggs and have kids find them. That's why we do it. Hey, did you know that the Christmas tree is this, this, and that? Well, maybe for some people. But do the Hadleys have a Christmas tree in their house? Yes. Pagan. Not in our house, it isn't. It's evergreen. Reminds us of Jesus. Always in eternal life. And the lights are pretty. That's why we have. Bible says, Paul said, to me, born again, all things are lawful. Not everything is profitable. As anything in the Lord, let no man judge you, says the Apostle Paul, on what day or what occasion you worship. If your heart is to give Jesus Christ all the glory, then by all means worship him any and every day of the week. Amen, you guys? All right, back to Babylon. Tammuz dies, by the way. He dies on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. But according to Babylonian lore, he is resurrected on the very next day. Wait a minute, isn't that several centuries before Jesus? Yeah. Is that the devil trying to mess up the model? Yes, because the devil was in the garden, remember, in the form of this Nakosh, or shining one. And God told the Nakosh exactly what he was going to do. Eve, through your seed, you're going to crush his head. And Lucifer was listening. And there are so many prophecies in the Bible about any number of sort of understandings about innocent blood being shed, about Messiah, hundreds of prophecies about Messiah. He would die and resurrect 3 days. Lucifer knows the Bible. And he went ahead, and in the Babylonian sort of thing, he works into their mythology and occultism an eternally virginal woman, a queen of heaven, and a supernatural, immaculate conception, etc., etc. So don't be surprised. The devil knew that was coming. Nimrod founds a city set against the things of God. He's the first dictator in the first world empire against God. And in Genesis 11, if we were to keep reading, Nimrod concentrates all the people's resources and brain power on what? Remember, God said, go out and multiply. Nimrod says, no, come in. And let's make a really cool city that the humans are very impressed with. And what did Nimrod do? What was his construction project? The Tower of Babel. And the Bible says, so we could touch the sky. Well, that's quaint. That was an astrology look at. They were looking at the stars as well. But they perverted it into the zodiac. So in Genesis 11, they put people's brain power together, and they built this situation to try to basically go right against God. So what does God do? He shows up. he says, what are the humans up to? Oh my. And to avoid man's collective effort to disobey God and worship the occult, what did God do? He confounds the languages. And the term Babel now means what? Babel. Babel, blah, 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 blah. So when someone is babbling incoherently, why did God confuse the languages? Because God says, if this is what the humans do when they put their minds to it, not good. And I think it's interesting that the internet has now turned that all around. You know, there are apps out there that are free of charge. Somebody writes to you from Korea, somebody writes to you from wherever, and you run it through an app and it comes out English. If you have it on your phone, you speak in English, but you're traveling through Italy and you can order your Slurpee and your cheeseburger. It's turning it back around. All occultic and false religions have their genesis in Babylon. Astrology, human sacrifice, the man-God worship thing, necromancy, channeling the dead, demonism, dream interpretation, holding place for the dead, purgatory, Yule logs, secret wisdom societies, including the Masons. And by the way, I had to do this too. Hope you'll indulge me. There's parts of Babylon that are still with us today. Go ahead, if you would, Blake. There's my dollar bill. I took it out today. Did you know that in 1782, the third committee to design the dollar bill consisted of a majority of Freemasons? Did you know that the Masons can be traced all the way back to Babylon? It's still around. The Egyptians were big time into that whole kind of concept. In 1935, the FDR administration, under a third term, Vice President Harry A. Wallace from Iowa, by the way, who was deeply involved in Freemasonry, he designed the current dollar bill. Notice the all-seeing eye of Osiris. The Egyptian called her the sun, or him, the sun god, also known as Amun-Ra. Notice within the triangle. What is the triangle? It's a symbol of the great architect of the universe in their estimation. Notice the 9 tail feathers. The Council of 9 are believed to be the top level of Freemasonry. If you have really good eyes, you can count the feathers on the eagle there. You might notice that there's 33 feathers on the left and 32 feathers on the right. In Freemasonry, the 32nd and honorary 33rd levels of Freemasonry. What about the eagle? Hey, everybody knows the eagle is an American bird. Really? Remember the Masonic influence. The eagle represents Amun-Ra, the sun god. Both to the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Persians, they all held that the sun god was very, very sacred. I want you to know this if you're kind of privy to it. There's lots of numbers and occurrences of 13. 13. 13 is often used in occultic literature as relating to power and authority, especially as it relates to Lucifer. We'll go quickly. There are 13 leaves on the olive branch. There's 13 bars and 13 stripes. There's 13 arrows, 13 letters with 13 letters in the word e pluribus unum, which is Latin for out of the many, one. There's 13 stars in the crest, 13 granite stones in the pyramid, 13 letters in Annuit Coeptus. Annuit Coeptus means announcing the birth of Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new world order. True story. What is the goal of the New World Order in Masonic literature? It's the 1,000-year reign of their Lord Matra, the sun god. This yet to come 1,000-year reign is symbolized in the unfinished pyramid. Okay, there's more, but let's move on because I'm running out of time. Go ahead. Sophisticated, modern, cool city. This is who Babylon is. Who is this guy? This is the ancient Babylon. That's our boy, Mr. Hammurabi. He and his Hammurabi, coat of Hammurabi, hanging gardens of Hammurabi, etc., etc. That's about 1790 to 1750 BC. That's our boy Hammurabi. Go. Here was the first of the ancient Babylonian Empire. And you can see there, by the way, bottom right third of the slide, there is Elam, Persian Gulf, as you can see. And there is Susa. Do you see Susa there? Shushan in our Bibles in the book of Esther. But anyway, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, that is the Valley of Shinar. That is the first one. It kind of rises, but it's nothing like this. Go. This is called Neo-Babylon. This is our boy Nebuchadnezzar. He's 606 BC to 562 BC. Look how big his empire was. Largely regarded as the first world empire. See Carchemish up there to the top? That's where the good king Josiah is killed by Pharaoh Necho there. He is killed, and that is going to open the way for Nebuchadnezzar, who then defeats Necho at Carchemish, swings south, he destroys Pharaoh, and now he is in control of the entire region. Oh, and by the way, he swings by Jerusalem, which is also a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Go. Here's the city, and this exacting sort of artist rendition is largely thanks to a German archaeology, a guy by the name of Sir Robert Coldaway. 1899 to 1917, he excavates the city. Babylon was never destroyed by an enemy. When Cyrus takes it over, he says it's too cool. He doesn't destroy it. And then when Alexander the Great, he shows up to Babylon, he says, this is the coolest city I've ever seen. And if you've heard me say before, Alexander the Great then says, I'm going to move the capital of Greece here. And he's going to dredge and had plans to dredge the Euphrates River so that ocean-going vessels could come up from the Persian Gulf and disembark there right at the palace. Hit the go button if you would. That is the ziggurat to Marduk. Go. It was pretty impressive. A very large building and structure. And Coldaway found a number of things we'll talk about later. But that's the ziggurat. That's their big temple to Marduk. Go. We'll go back. Hit the go button again. That is the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. There it looks rather simplistic in its art, but you'll notice it's a good size. Go. Here's what it actually looked like. It was unbelievable. Those blue stones were a special mixture of clay and pigments baked in a certain fashion that their brilliant blue has hung out even to this day. You'll see that there are waterfalls because they employed slaves with big water wheels to walk on them and lifted water to several higher levels. And you'll notice that all the trees and the flora and the fauna. Can you imagine going to a city like this before there was anything like elevators and irrigation systems? You would have been just blown away. No wonder when Alexander the Great shows up, he says, this is awesome. Go. Hit the go button again. Here's the Ishtar Gate. Go. Artist rendition. That's where all the potentates came down. This is likely where the rickety old Daniel runs into Cyrus the Great when we're going to read about that in Daniel chapter 5. Cyrus comes rolling in. Daniel shows Cyrus his name in the book of Isaiah. Cyrus goes, what? What's it doing in your Bible? When was it written? 150 years before you were born. Seriously? Yeah. Cyrus is so impressed by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he issues the decree to let the Jews go and be released from their 70-year exile. But look at that. Wouldn't that be cool if you could go see that today? Go? You can. Coldaway found most of the blue stones. That is not blue stones enhanced for the tourists. You clean them up and you restack them. That is in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, because Coldaway took all those stones and reassembled them there in Germany. That is the actual and real gate of Ishtar. Go. And lions and a winged lion was a big part of who they were. If you could touch them, they don't let you touch them, but if you could go there, look at those stones. Those stones, in many cases, are 2,300 years old. Well, pardon me, 2,600 years old. Go. Isn't that astounding? That's in Germany right now. Go. So back there, and then I think I'm going to keep cruising. The wall around Babylon was over 11 miles, 85 feet thick. Watchtowers every 65 feet. That's 950 towers. It is estimated they could race chariots 2 and 3 abreast across the top. Those are big walls. Protected by a moat fed by the Euphrates River. Population of this Babylon is estimated to be over 500,000 people. And in those days, that's a lot of people. It contained one of the 7 wonders of the world, Nebuchadnezzar's hanging gardens. Dense forests are rare, and exotic trees and plants and animals were walking across the top of his palace. This was no bumpkin of a city. This was the intellectual center of the world. Remember how I said that this is the anti-city? In this day, this Babylon was the greatest city that humans have ever built, because that's what Lucifer is about. Real quickly, did you know that Babylonian science is by no means primitive? They're the ones who figured out that there were 360 degrees in a circle, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. They greatly advanced the lever and pulley. They greatly modernized the sundial. Very accurate. They invented one of the oldest writing systems ever, cuneiform. They ground crystals on a lathe to form primitive telescopes. They accurately predicted eclipses of the sun and moon, accurately charted phases of the planet Venus. Their critical observation and mathematics wove into the macrocosm. They begin to think, wow, maybe we can apply that to the microcosm. So that's where astrology came from. The Tower of Babel was an observatory. And then lastly, our last stop, would you go to the book of Zechariah chapter 5, and we'll end here. Is the devil done with Babylon? Answer, let's check it out. Zechariah chapter 5. Zechariah chapter 5. It's been a while since we were there. Look at verse number 5. Zechariah, a couple centuries in front of Jesus. Then the angel who talked with me, chapter 5, Zechariah verse 5. Then the angel who talked with me came out and said, lift up your eyes, see what this is, what's coming forth. What is it? And he said, check it out. It's a basket that is going forth. He also said, this is their resemblance throughout the earth. And notice there's a big lead disc. There's a lead top or lid on it. And there's a woman sitting inside the basket. Then he said, this is wickedness. Right in your margin there, Revelation 17, verse 3. The Bible is always its own best explainer. Who is the harlot of Revelation 17? It's right here in Zechariah 5. And he pushed her back down into the basket, threw the lid cover over its mouth, verse 9. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were 2 women coming in the wind in their wings. By the way, these are not angels. Angels are always depicted as male. Women, angelic, as it were, beings are an omen of the occultic. Wind in the wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. Right in your margin, that is an unclean bird. Leviticus 11, verse 19. These 2 aviators are foreboding. And they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth, and then they took off, verse 10. And so I said to the angel who talked to me, well, where are they going? Verse 11, and he said to me, to build a house for it in the land of what? This is the Bible declaring that Babylon will be built again. In fact, go ahead if you would. What's homie's name in Iraq? Saddam Hussein, thank you, it just came to me. That is Babylon. Baghdad is about 70 miles to the south. Saddam Hussein thought that he was a reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. He started to rebuild Babylon. But did you know the U.S. Army had something to say about that? Go. He built parts of it. This is a fascinating picture to me in the foreground. Some of those mud bricks are 2,600 years old. The one behind are the Saddam Hussein. Go. There's the old Tower of Babylon in this artist's depiction. Please understand that Babylon will be built again. And by the time we get to Revelation 18, go. It will be the most fabulous cities that humans have ever seen. Lucifer did it once before. Under Hammurabi and then Nebuchadnezzar, that was Lucifer saying, I'm in control. I'm going to build a fabulous city, and all the humans will want to follow me. The rapture takes the church out. The Antichrist coalesces all the military and economic power. And if you think Dubai City is awesome, and it is, imagine what Lucifer is going to do through the Antichrist when he has all the money. And he's going to rebuild Babylon again. Likely dredge the Euphrates River. And ocean-going vessels are going to traipse up the Euphrates River. And Lucifer thumbs under his suspenders. I did it! My city is the best city in the world. For many humans, they're going to go, golly. The Bible says that Babylon is going to be a haven for demons. And the Bible says in 1 hour, God will destroy it.